The time of the Antichrist and the camp of the saints, theological and doctrinal presentation from His Holiness Pope Jacobus I, on the most urgent and pressing subject of the present time situation in the world, the secular powers increasing hostilities and such like preparations for an open, communist, atheistic, persecution of the true Roman Catholic Church, and the papal guidance to those who still sincerely desire to save their immortal souls for all eternity, their proper conduct, towards their conversion from heresy and from such like depriving factors, them becoming truly Catholic, which is essential in order to be able to successfully resist, with the divine help, these atheistic communist forces of darkness, forces of the devil. The recently and in the U.S. independently published FBI memo with the heretical and sacrilegious consequences, the sectate usurping the divinely given authority of the Roman Catholic Church, and thus of the sovereign pontiff and his papal teaching and magisterial authority, proving thus the factual development of the time, communist atheistic penetration of these governments so that their ideological goal of worldwide communist revolution is achieved, persecuting the true Catholic Church and attempting to fully eliminate her divinely given authority, but atheism and communism will never prevail nor succeed, as of Satan and their abominable service to him, all will be destroyed by God at the end, His true Catholic Church protected and our enemies crushed, as it is all written in the Holy Scripture.
Apocalypse 20. And when the 1,000 years shall be consummated, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go forth and seduce the nations that are upon the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, and shall gather them into battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they ascended upon the breadth of the earth, and encompassed the camp of the saints in the beloved city. And there came down fire from God out of heaven, and devoured them. And the devil which seduced them was cast into the pool of fire and brimstone, where both the beast and the false prophet shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. And the following is the visibility of that FBI memo that these servants of Satan have put out to contradict the teaching of the church. So this is the pictures of the FBI memo that these people have published, and it was leaked and it was published on the internet by their former special agent in charge. And these are the pages of this. This is complete. It's illegal as it is, and not only that, but it's a sacrilege because of what these people propose that needs to be done. Secular governments do not have authority over the matters of faith and morals and consciences. And so such secular governments, when they transgress that constraint and limitations that they are under, then they create government-created religion and virtually attack the Holy Mother Roman Catholic Church, which is in charge of the doctrine and the matters of conscience, as it is. So by this proposal, what they're proposing, we will go through it in our presentation afterwards, is self-evident that these people do not respect the authority of the church, and no matter what they write, like on this page, they are constraints of their First Amendment, but then they follow such guidance of a leftist organization listing all the heretics, organizations of the heretics of the tied with the Novus Ordo and so forth, and they seem to think that they can just establish the proper doctrine contrary to what the divine law says and the church doctrine dictates and have been declared. So then the US Congress stepped in and started investigating, but this is insufficient because it never says, there are 3 pages here, requesting the FBI Director Ray to supply them with more information and to try to accuse him of false testimony and perjury in front of the committee, Judicial Committee of the U.S. Congress, U.S. House, and but this is inadmissible. They do not have that authority to dictate what the proper doctrine is and how this can be addressed. They simply cannot get involved. If they do, that in itself illustrates that they want to dictate these matters, and transgress the authority of the Church and attack the authority of the Church, which is sacrilege in front of God. So in the excerpt itself, evident that this is usurpation of the authority of the Church. And then so we have downloaded these pages, and we will read from it. It's a quite stunning intrusion of the secular authority into the matters of the Church. And before we begin going through the excerpts and so forth, just to illustrate that the time of the Antichrist is very near, when they actually have the audacity to go through all this and intrude into these matters and try to accuse the Church or those who claim to be Catholic of being extremists and all this. It in itself truly is indication that those organizations, those secular powers, have been penetrated by people who are hostile. That means enemies of the Church, which the worst enemies of the Church are atheistic communists. And this is not our opinion. This is known fact that the subversion of entire governments is required by the communist plan in order to establish communism worldwide. It comes from Russia and China. There are fully communist countries, including Russia, run by KGB criminals. And they have not given up, as the Manivalsky doctrine and the Sun Tzu strategy indicates. They have not given up. And in fact, they have set it all up, this long-term strategy to lure the unwitting and also penetrated Western countries by communists, penetrated into the sort of deep sleep, and then cause their destruction, with their clenched fist. So let us read from this. This is extremely important publication. It's truly this. It's from the Federal. You can see the logo. I don't know which one is this one. Logo. Federal Bureau of Investigation and so forth. Interest of racial and ethnically motivated violent extremists and radical traditional Catholic ideology almost certainly presents new mitigation opportunities. That means spying, entrapment, all kinds of things. So the government in itself, the secular government full of heretics and apostates and infidels as it is, or communists, want to dictate to the Church what the proper doctrine and matters of conscience is, which is tyranny. That has nothing else in its truly view as it is than establishing non-Catholic or anti-Catholic tyranny, which that's what communism is. Atheistic tyranny, slavery, enslavement of the mind and soul as it is. And the Church cannot function in such a society run by communists. It's impossible, which the bloody history of communism proves. So this came from Richmond, Virginia, FBI office there. FBI Richmond assesses the increasingly observed interest of racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists in radical traditional Catholic ideology almost certainly presents opportunities for threat mitigation through the exploitation of new avenues for tripwire, which means, at least in our understanding, what it means obtaining intelligence information through entrapment and so forth, causing the person to trip really into trap as it is, or obtaining that information without revealing where that information is going. Tripwire and source development. That means spies. FBI Richmond makes this assessment with high confidence based on FBI investigations, local law enforcement agency reporting, local law enforcement reporting. So what they have people reporting on the parishes, this concerns the heretics. We don't have any such problem here as it is, because there's no whole lot of involvement of those outside, we would immediately recognize that that person has been insincere, because God will make him visible. So that's the true Catholic Church, in our person, the Sovereign Pontiff. So God will make that person visible, showing the evil fruits of evil tree. So this document in itself, although it claims on page, and not there's several pages, but on one of the pages it claims that the FBI does not, it's in warnings and caveats, potential criminality exhibited by certain members of a group referenced herein does not negate, nor is it a comment on the constitutional rights of the group itself or its members to exercise their rights under the First Amendment of the US Constitution. The FBI does not investigate, collect, or maintain information on US persons solely for the purpose of monitoring activities protected by the First Amendment. This is just to cover their tracks as it is, but they are doing it. They are intruding into the matters of the authority of the Church as it is, and using the secular authority to do so is a sin of sacrilege, and obviously the Church will resist. We will not tolerate this, and we have explained this in our previous recording, but this is important. By our apostolic authority, we thoroughly condemn this abomination as it is, with the strongest terms as it is. So we'll go through some of the other details. Now it came about that they found out that this was spread at least to 2 more places of the FBI in 2 other states in the United States, and it's self-evident that similar circumstances are most certainly developing in other countries, more hostile and so forth. So this is not isolated matter, it's worldwide phenomena, and we can cite some examples of this fact as it is. So, but it would be too long recording as it is. But yes, we know of European countries, and we know of Australia that exists such a horrible situation as it is. So the intrusion of the secular government into the matters of the Church is worldwide. And that illustrates the developing towards the time of the Antichrist, when that limit is reached, and those people, they are fanatics. They truly hate God, hate the Church, His Church, and want to dictate way of life as it is, or procure for themselves enslavement of those who are subject to them, which is part of the communist strategy. Communism itself is enslavement of mind and soul, as it is. Enslavement, and the body, in fact, because the body has to serve as a slave. And that in that country that's really entrapped in communist tyranny. Then it says, in making this assessment, FBI Richmond relied on the key assumption that these racial and ethnically motivated violent extremists will continue to find radical traditionalist Catholic ideology attractive, and will continue to attempt to connect with this ideology, with these adherents of that, both virtually via social media and in person at places of worship. So that they seeking, this FBI document seeks excuse how to intrude these places and how to get their foothold in them by pointing to something that is as if that was permissible. So in other words, they trying to establish themselves as a spy centers within those places where they think that the Catholic faith is practiced, which is in their will. They would do it to us if they were permitted, or if we will never tolerate something like this. But in other words, these people have the audacity to think that people, even those heretics that go to SSPX and other such places, And there's a notation on the bottom of the analyst, which is another that's evident it's a heresy, as it is, because he's assessing what was taking place and what is Catholic, what is not Catholic. So they truly intruding into the internal matters of the church. For this alone, for this notation of what they write, they should be punished severely. This disbandment and get rid of that whole entity as it is, because truly they're transgressing the limits that the secular government has. Of course, nothing will happen because that's the development of the situation as it is. It is truly criminal in this sense, criminal and abomination in front of God. And like we said, we condemn this whole development as it is by apostolic authority. Increase or decrease of subject activity on social media platforms and forums maintained or frequented by radical traditional Catholics, or the public distancing of prominent or traditional Catholic personalities or institutions from ideology, these radical motivated, racially motivated, and ethnically motivated ideologies, extremist ideologies. So the FBI is involved in as an arbiter to declare what is and what is not extremist, which is not the domain of the state and never will be. That's the domain of the church, matters of faith and morals. And we can cite quite a few examples in today's world as it is that are complete abomination. And surely God will punish such developments. Then we could read all that, but this is accessible on the internet, but we don't. It's an insult to God, an insult to His church. We actually have to go through all this, that we have to, in fact, deal with this kind of situation as it is. Of course, evident it is. And that's where we have to make that point, that the Novus sect is not Catholic, that's not a Catholic church. So when the FBI gets involved in assessing what is and what is not Catholic, and what is not extremist, and when they cite about the Novus Ordo and so forth, they passing judgment on matters that doesn't belong them. So they basically voicing their opinion what is not Catholic. That's not the domain of the state. In itself, that's a way of persecution of the church, because they usurping the authority of the church in order to pass judgment on what is not Catholic. That's how serious the situation is. And in fact, we don't know what to expect anymore, because they have history of overstepping authority as it is, and views of authority. Not only that, but in this sense, what we read in this abomination as it is, it's self-evident that these people have no regard for the law of God, as it is. We will read this excerpt. The ongoing convergence of the far-right, wide nationalist movement and radical traditional Catholic was further demonstrated through the increase in hostility toward abortion rights advocates on social media sites in the run-up to and aftermath of the Dobbs vs. Jackson Women's Health Organization decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. That means about the abortion and all this. The abomination that existed as it is in violation of the divine law. Thou shalt not kill, the commandment of God, fifth commandment. So the state cannot enact a law that would contradict that. The church has the duty to voice out. We have published on this subject. There's no need to go on any further in all this. But that it's self-evident as part of the Catholic faith, so every Catholic has to obey it. And those who are not Catholic, the heretics and so forth, obviously they will compromise, or they will just tolerate these kind of intrusions and abuse of authority, secular authority. And they saying that this is the first kind of document of its kind that has dealt with this kind of situation. All this, they're suggesting to basically infiltrate the heretics and so forth, and to obtain more data and monitor what is taking place. FBI Richmond assesses the radical ethnic and so forth organizations' interest in radical traditional Catholic is likely to increase over the next 12 to 24 months in the run-up to the next general election cycle, complicating the overall threat picture of these ethnic and racial extremists, what they call them, the threat of them, while also creating new opportunities for mitigation efforts. This assessment is made in light of the ongoing polarization characterizing the US political environment and the probability that policy issues of mutual interest to these radical racial and ethnic extremists and the radical traditional Catholic we don't use in the church traditional. There's no such thing as traditional Catholic faith. It doesn't exist. There's only Catholic faith, which is Catholic tradition, but not that it will be praised. Because to use that phrase means to open the door for heresy. Because if there was another way of profess the Catholic faith, then is the Catholic tradition. And that is heresy. There's only one faith. That's Catholic tradition, and that's it. So those who profess something else, they are heretics, and they do not profess the Catholic faith. They cannot be and must not be called Catholic. That's the Novus Ordo sect, and all those heretics who recognize it, and so forth. We have spoken about this subject before. So, we go a little further. This assessment is made in light of the ongoing polarization and so forth. As will remain in the public spotlight, these adherents of the radical traditional Catholic, catalyzing events in which these racial motivated and ethnic and violent extremists and the radical traditional Catholic adherents might have common cause include legislation or judicial decisions in areas such as abortion rights. There is no such thing as abortion right. No such thing. This was written by evident atheist, a person who doesn't fear punishment from God. These people want to dictate matters of conscience and matters of the Catholic faith. Abortion rights don't exist. There's no such thing as abortion right. Because it violates the law of God. There's no such thing. No matter what the state enacts as laws, such laws must never be obeyed by Catholics. Otherwise they will be excommunicated. There's no obedience to the state when the state is enacting laws contrary to the Catholic faith. Those laws must be rejected and never obeyed. That's the doctrine of the church, always have been. That's why the church has martyrs. And there's no, the canon law provides, this is not an excommunicable offense to propose this and so forth, to be involved in this. It's a known fact, as it is to those, even those heretics. They know about it. Abortion rights, immigration, affirmative action, which is violation of the liberty of conscience as it is, and the sodomites, protections. It is evident that the US government and other governments in the world have been penetrated by these kind of people who have nothing better to do than to intrude in the matters of conscience, matters of the Catholic faith. And they're violating the sanctity and attacking the authority of the church. And God will repay it. We'll continue a little bit further because there's just so much to do. Ultimately, they this affection with mainline Catholic churches, there's no such thing as mainline Catholic churches, on social issues and the aforementioned areas. So when the novels of the sect give consent to sodomites and permissiveness towards that abomination, then those who disagree are branded extremists by the FBI. That's the outcome of this publication. Again, intrusion into the matters of the church and usurpation of the church authority. The government, the secular government, wants to be arbiter. No matter how this will grow, this is just the beginning, but it's evident that because they didn't do anything about it, that person didn't get fired, at least to our best knowledge as it is, and there's no indication who that is. But the congressional committee investigated a little bit and determined that there has not been concluded that the internal investigation, and what will happen, and they asking for more documents and so forth. But again, this has to be dealt with much more serious and firm way, not only to investigate but to punish, because this is unacceptable. This truly creates tyranny, as it is. Nonetheless, the current trend of these extremists, racial motivated extremists, violent extremists, interest in radical traditional Catholic ideology provides new opportunities to mitigate this threat of these extremists through outreach to traditional Catholic parishes and the development of sources with the placement and access to report on radical racially motivated extremists seeking to use radical traditional Catholic social media sites or places of worship as facilitation platforms to promote violence. We are not, this is right here, it's on the top, that's the conclusion of that, and so forth. To promote violence. This analyst who wrote it, who himself wrote this in FBI, does not understand how the Catholic Church functions, that we don't tolerate violence, that it's mortal sin. Such person would not be permitted to continue unless that was absolved and amendment was established, as it is. We don't tolerate extremists among us in a way of those who promote violence. Yes, that is extreme, as it is, but not that the FBI would get involved in assessment of what it is and what it isn't. So obviously it violates the laws of charity. But then the church does not tolerate heretics and people who are outside the church to dictate to us what we supposed to do. Our strict discipline, as it is the guarantee and guidance of the Holy Ghost within the church, is the guarantee of peaceful life of the church as it is. Unless there are circumstances that involve self-defense of the rights of God and of the church, authority of the church. And that has been done, unfortunately, in times past. Unfortunately for the fact that we regret that we have to do such things, like defend ourselves against the intrusion of the state by means that are available and are permissible. The current doctrine, we will address this at the end of this recording, but current doctrine establishes, that was put in place during the times of the most deplorable Spanish Civil War, between 1936 and 1939, Anno Domini, by our predecessor of blessed memory, Pius the 11th and Pius the 12th. So then, when we continue on this subject, we will go through one more excerpt right here. And the appendix, there's a list of, which they quote this analyst, or this person from the FBI from Richmond, Virginia office. Southern Poverty Law Center define radical traditional Catholic hate groups in the United States. This is incredible. So they rely on assessment of people who are known leftists, people who have nothing to do with the authority of the church, to call, which is an insult and sacrilege as it is, to call those who claim to be Catholic as hate groups, because they are Catholic, because they don't adhere to that ideology which the rest of the world would like to adhere, or the government that is penetrated by these enemies of the church would like others to adhere. The valid code of the canon law, the 1917 Code of Canon Law of the Church, Canon 1160, the sacred places are exempt from the jurisdiction of the civil authorities, and in them the legitimate ecclesiastical authority freely exercises its jurisdiction. There is no possibility that this could be violated as it is. So the state has no say what the property of the church and authority of the church is in those places. In other words, there can be no intrusion, and therefore any intrusion, as we have documented in this excerpt from the FBI, any kind of type of spying, anything violates this canon law and in fact establishes new rule for the church. And that is tyranny. So that it's evident that those who do not defend the rights of the church are therefore on the side of these enemies of the church and the secular government as it is. Those who would dare, we repeat that with seriousness of the situation, those who would dare to attempt to spy on the church or a member of the church, and those who would dare to assert, because we don't know who may convert from these heretics, whom God may help to see the truth and come to us in search of the true sacraments, of the true absolution in the sacrament of penance, valid sacrament of penance, and be absolved of the heresy, which is our authority, and solely our authority based on the canon law, and our supreme teaching authority to absolve those who are heretics from their mortal sin of heresy, to accept them in the external form as it is until the duration of heresy, to admit them into the church for the protection of their soul and eternal salvation. So those who would dare to be involved in any of this, to accept this kind of, we doubt that such people would exist, but let's say they would have to confess it and denounce it, and they will have to repair it if they were involved in any of this, to help the secular government to intrude into these and spy on those parishes, even though they are run by heretics and attended by heretics. Even that. So that they're listing several places on this page, but that will be our conclusion, and we have some other excerpts, and at the end we will address what needs to be done on the subject. It's very important to understand the situation and the times that we live in. So they're listing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, according to this organization, Southern Poverty Law Center, which is, again, they are heretics and atheists, evidently, or at least what gives them the right to assess who these people are. They don't have that authority. So to hold them hate groups because they don't agree with those ideological goals and philosophical assessments of these organizations means that they could be included on the FBI document in the appendix, to list them there as if they were already in the view of the FBI to be attacked as it is. they list heretics. What we gather from this, what is very dangerous on the subject, some of these places are infiltrated or could be infiltrated by communist agents, or established as the promoters of the Novus Ordo sect. And some of them they are listed here, which we know of. And they have ties to places in the Vatican and so forth, including the listing Fatima Crusader and so forth, which is Novus Ordo connected to begin with, and was founded by a person who had personal ties with Giovanni Battista Mantini, who had connections with the Kremlin, with Stalin back then. So this is not a small matter. But what is the danger is to what they call false flag warfare, as it is, to use the name of Catholic in order to discredit, or rather to cause so much evil that the Catholic Church would be attacked on that ground. And in other words, these are enemies of the Church who would then be the cause of secular power intrusion to have the excuse of what they citing here as violent extremists and so forth. So they already establishing the connection in this document, or at least attempting to establish. They saying that is a source of presents new mitigation opportunities. This in itself is a sacrilege, what the FBI has dared to publish. No matter what we have published the excerpt, the video excerpt of the FBI director, Ray, testifying in front of the Judicial Committee of the House of Representatives in the United States. We have published it in our last publication, or one of the last publications, not the very last, but before last. And the excerpt was self-evident that the state thinks that they can intrude into these and assess what is and what is not extremist, and what is not Catholic faith, which is inadmissible. So they are investigating. This is from Congressman Jordan, chairman of the Judicial Committee in the House of Representatives. This doesn't mean anything. They can be replaced, or they can be removed, and some other, the elections, some other person can step in, leftist, Democrat, communist, whatsoever, and start pushing this forward. This is like the first step towards that direction. One, it becomes acceptable to them, or at least they have their foot in the door, then they just continue pushing forward. That's a known tactic of the communists. Of course, to his credit, the person who published it, he was former special agent in that same office who published this publication. He explained that obviously the person that wrote it and the lawyer of that office signed off. There was 5 people that signed off on it, on this abomination. This person that published it, this former special agent, he explained that the FBI would not tolerate this as it is in former times, that it's very poor, it's just an opinion as it is. There's no evidence of any of such things. And again, if there was any wrongdoing on part of any members of the church, on church property or in church authority as it is, that person would not be released to the secular power until the conclusion of that internal investigation would conclude, of the church, would conclude that that person truly committed that and would be released into the hands of the secular authority. That's how it was always done. In today's times, that's impossible, because they automatically think that they can intrude, even in the parishes and so forth, just as they please. As long as it's on their soil, as the country, then they think that they can just plainly enter and do whatever they please. serve warrants and do searches and those kind of things, or dictate where the Mass is said and those kind of things. And it's not that far back when they were doing it, when they were forcing people to adhere to these rules regarding that virus that came from China, the biological weapon as it is, which we have addressed in our previous recordings. So there's no need to go through all this. Time of the Antichrist are coming, and this is just the first indication that they are very near, because this will not stop. It's self-evident that it will not stop. So then we will continue with another excerpt, and we will address this, what to do about this, in regards to for those who truly want to save their soul, who are destined by God to be converted, and what it will look like in the camp of the saints, what we will have to do. If it be the will of God that we live that long, or be there as the head of the church, or if it will be the successor, that is up to our Lord.
The KGB organized and executed atheistic communist assault on the Catholic Church has forced the true Roman Catholic Church into the catacombs, and this for some decades now, and so the communist penetration of the Catholic Church institutions is the self-evident consequence of this diabolical Russian communist strategy of worldwide communist domination, and so those associated with this non-Catholic pro-communist apostate sect Novus Ordo are thus guilty of sacrilege and ipso facto excommunicated from the Catholic Church as heretics and apostates. So likewise when this particular enemy of the Church, the ipso facto excommunicated notorious heretic William Jenkins publicly advertised a rosary prayer which he admits is fully controlled by the same pro-communist Novus Ordo sect, and leads the SSPV parishioners to join such an event run and controlled by these sectarians, then the outcome of public scandal and sacrilege is inevitable, and then, as related in the following excerpts, this same excommunicated heretic Jenkins admits that it was not a good thing to do, which truth he had the duty to recognize before he first suggested it, an abomination and in fact a direct proof of him and the likes of him, all heretics, not possessing the true Catholic priesthood and thus no protection nor guidance of the Holy Ghost at all. Stay away as far as possible from these servants of Satan.
Now I ask you to join us next Sunday for our public rosary downtown. We have made the commitment to be before the steps on the steps of the courthouse, before the doors of the courthouse, and pleading Almighty God for just judgment for our country. And we ask for God's mercy there. We will be praying the rosary next Sunday also. This time, we'll start the rosary at 1:45 p.m., a little bit earlier than usual, but we'll start the rosary at 1:45 because of an event that is scheduled very, very near the church here, and in fact in Doral Field. At Doral Field, there will be an event called a Rosary Rally. It is not being sponsored by Immaculate Conception Church, but it is being held for the conservative New Order Catholics, and many traditional Catholics too will join them, I'm sure. Those who still have the faith, those who are practicing the traditional faith in its entirety, and those who have not yet found their way back to the traditional faith, the true altar, and the true Mass. We pray that we will be as a kind of leaven for that crowd and help them to find their way back to practicing the traditional Mass. Now, some of you, many of you, in fact, have been asking about this. Many have been sending me information. I would rather receive notice from 50 of you about the same thing than have any of you say, well, Father Jenkins knows about this, for there's no need for me to let him know. And so I don't hear from anyone. No, I'd rather hear from 50 of you about this, and it tells me how important it is, how significant it is to you. And we have a number of, well, these days, dignitaries coming to Doral Field beginning at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on next Sunday, August 6th. We're having the rosary downtown earlier so that those who wish can make the trip to Doral Field, can be easily done within 12-15 minutes of travel time for the event beginning at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There are names that have become household names among Catholics, especially traditional Catholics, names such as Jim Caviezel will be there, and also General Michael Flynn, who was here a year ago, actually speaking in our own St. Susanna Hall. And you, of course, and I are invited as well. That's called a rosary rally because they will be praying the rosary, but I don't know under what circumstances. I don't have the details. I know that there will be speeches given by these various people who are going to address a very serious question. And the very serious question concerns every one of us. It concerns abortion in the state of Ohio in particular. It concerns a ballot initiative that is before us. We will have to be voting on this. Those of us who can vote will be called upon to vote upon this ballot initiative on August 8th, just 2 days after this Rosary Rally of next Sunday.
And then what has actually happened there and what heretical scandal this non-Catholic pro-communist novice Ordo sect has caused, and Jenkins was still inviting people to join these servants of Satan, which in itself is a heresy. Bear not the yoke with infidels, 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14 to 18.
That to us. So whether your politicians hear me or not, it's in God's hands. The second thing that they gave us was liberty. Liberty. Liberty.
Praying the luminous mysteries, the newest added by
Apostate Wojtyla.
that I like to think of as reflecting on the life of Christ as he entered into his public ministry.
Did Bishop Karol Wojtyla kiss the Quran? On May 14, 1999, Bishop Karol Wojtyla, who was never valid pope as heretics cannot assemble in valid conclave and such election by them is null and utterly void, Wojtyla both bowed to and kissed the Quran. Many have claimed that it was actually a copy of the Chaldean book of the Gospels, but Raphael First Bedoid, Chaldean Catholic "patriarch" of Baghdad, later said that Bishop Karol Wojtyla both bowed to and kissed the Quran presented to him by a Muslim entourage. What this excommunicated apostate Wojtyla did is an act of public apostasy and nothing less.
So, you know that as of our program last week, there was to be a program, Rosary Rally, a Rosary Rally held just a couple of blocks from here, Doral Field in Norwood. And, you know, after having the speeches, which I understand were good speeches, people who attended the speeches said that they all had something good to say, although there were some things that were said that you wouldn't want little children to be hearing, because some of these things are rather sordid by nature. But at the end, they decided to have what was supposed to be a rosary rally and about the rosary, so you'd think they'd be praying the 15 decades of the rosary, the traditional rosary, because these were Catholic people who had traditional faith. But Bishop Strickland came, and, you know, there are people who have high hopes for him, because he was the prelate of the Novus Ordo who actually went out and led the protest against these perverted homosexual nuns, so-called, right, out in Los Angeles, at Dodger Stadium, right? So they had high hopes for him. What it comes down to, what do they have? They have 5 decades, not even the rosary, but the 5 decades of the luminous mysteries. That's it for the rosary rally. And they're holding up the rosary saying, this is the weapon, this is what we used to have to fight. This is the, you know, power of heaven comes through the mysteries of the rosary. And so they don't even take mysteries of the rosary. And on top of that, they don't even pray any more than that. It's like over in like 12, 15 minutes. And that's it. After spending 2 hours more talking and speeches. So unfortunately, I'm afraid it kind of degenerated into a Novus Ordo function.
So it is impossible to lead those who are subject to that authority, to lead them to perversion. And so there's no possibility that this notorious heretic excommunicated by our degree in times past, this truly there's no priesthood in these people, period, who Archbishop Lefebvre was and what he was using for missal. So this defect of intention, this person is not even priest, it's Jenkins, and the rest of them as it is. And he studied for the Novus Ordo, so he was there, there's no dispensation, nothing. Archbishop Lefebvre couldn't do it because he was already heretic himself. So there's no such thing as dispensing from that perpetual impediment of being part of the Novus Ordo previously. So this Jenkins is causing this kind of scandal, this kind of horrible situation as it is. He invites the people to go to join gathering of Novus Ordo sect, and then they call it a Rosary Rally. So what he expects that they will do over there, and then what is the conclusion? That he will invite those who are there with him from this fraudulent, illegitimate order, Society St. Pius V, to invite him to pray with the Novus Ordo sectarians. And you think that that's something that the church permits? That's why they are heretics, because that's not permitted. Because the danger of perversion, you cannot be praying with heretics, you cannot be praying with members of non-Catholic sect, no matter what the intention is. So this is complete sacrilege, it's abomination from God. It's like because there's no reconciliation because of the heresy of the non-Catholic religion. So you cannot be present at such places, no matter what they intend to do, no matter what kind of speeches they have. And the situation is clear. The priest has to inform the faithful that they cannot be voting for a law that is contrary to the Catholic faith, or they cannot be abstaining from supporting a law that will protect it. Or because if they are in constraints, that the priest has to explain it, what is going on, what needs to be done, what must be done. It's a matter of conscience. So the priest is bound to teach the truth in the parish. But we don't have true parishes anymore. These are heretics. Look at what this Jenkins is capable of doing. So there's no such thing as Diana. There's no such thing as reconciling with members of non-Catholic sect. In hopes, blind hopes that they will convert or something. They know that the Catholic faith exists, which is nothing else but Catholic tradition, but that's it. There's nothing that can be done except to pray for them for their conversion, obviously. But it's very hard to establish it because unless they reject that false religion, which is not Catholic, they still are members of the sect. So this Jenkins uses the term of Catholic in regards to members of non-Catholic sect. That's a horrible sacrilege. That's a heresy. So obviously there's no reconciliation. That's to prove who he is. They are not members of the church. They never were, in most part, members of the church because they were brought up. Most of them were brought up in that non-Catholic sect. That involves abjuration of heresy if they want to be members of the church, and examination of what they understand as the Catholic faith, the catechism and everything, which is the best catechism is the catechism of the Council of Trent, and so forth. So it's not a simple matter to convert, and it's a gift of God, as it is. So no, that's not possible to invite people to the parish to pray at the gathering that is organized by non-Catholic sect. That's not permitted. Canon Law 1258 specifies sacred functions, but the principle is standing. The danger of perversion is sufficiently there, and therefore there's no such thing as invite them, and he did it, and then he claims at the end on that other excerpt when they published just this week, somehow that he didn't know, or somehow implies that he didn't know that what will happen there. And he complains about it. Well, he's the one who invited those people that were with him to join. So obviously, you cannot be joining a gathering in prayer that's called a Rosary Rally, which is organized by the non-Catholic sect. So do not bear the yoke with unbelievers. And then St. Paul says in our place, Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, I think, or 1 Thessalonians, the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. Whatever is reproved is made manifest, and so forth is made light. So what to do when the time of the Antichrist comes? The camp of the saints. It's self-evident that the passage from the Apocalypse is signifying perhaps the equivalent of what the children of Israel were involved in when they were escaping from Egypt. That God will protect. Obviously, He promised to be with His church all days, even unto the consummation of the world, so that the church will not disappear, nor will be destroyed. That's impossible. That will be a heresy, in fact. So the devil will not succeed to destroy the Holy Mother Church, Roman Catholic Church, the true Catholic Church. Of course, those who are outside, then they will not obtain this protection. So then their best defense, best protection is to become truly Catholic, to abjure the heresy, to attempt to be reconciled, to address us, and to be accepted among us, among those very few who are left as true Catholics. Because to be a heretic means sentence of hell. Is there any possibility of active resistance to these evil times, the time of the Antichrist? And the answer is self-evident, because there are very few of us left, and the Church protects the peace at the cost of immense suffering as it is. But then there were times past when the necessity of active resistance was so imminent, like the Holy Crusade that was fought in Spain between 1936 to 1939, Anno Domini, which was blessed by our predecessor of blessed memory, Pius XI. On that account, the Catholics of Spain, which were still truly Catholic, won against the communists that were supported. The communists were got into power by act of fraud, and then they started communist terror, horrifying suffering, murders, executions, public executions of Catholics. Just it was sufficient to find the communist militia found rosary on the person was arrested and executed if there was any more evidence of support of any being truly Catholic, and so forth. There were priests who were murdered. That's part of historical fact. In Spain, 13 bishops, nearly 6,000 priests were murdered, and countless number of religious, and they were all martyred for the faith. That members of non-Catholic sect that calls itself Catholic obviously will not obtain such benefit and martyrdom from God, because to be a heretic or apostate disqualifies one from receiving it, because that person is outside the church. There was always that doctrine in Papal doctrine of the church. There's no reconciliation of this. Of course, it was published by our predecessors of blessed memory. It is impossible, among which is, if the memory serves correctly, Eugene IV, Council of Florence, and so forth. This is easily discoverable. We don't need to go through memory to cite all the details, but it's evident that those who are outside the church will not obtain martyrdom, that they will die for their heresy, not for the faith. They have to practice the Catholic faith, which is nothing else but the Catholic tradition, and be martyred. Then, if it pleases God, yes, but they are so very few. We have demonstrated in our publications that most of these people, all of these people who are truly not subject to us, they are heretics. There's no reconciliation of this. So, unless God converts those who are part of their so-called laity, then they will have to suffer the consequences. To be part of the illegitimate orders like SSPX and so forth, perhaps this warning from the FBI, the situation regarding the FBI, is the warning from God, because He will permit them to be persecuted like this by the state. in punishment of their obstinacy to the truth. So there's no possibility of resistance, because the numbers are resistance in a sense of active resistance when they start publicly persecuting the church with terror and arrests and all this. So there's no, that if there was such resistance possible, it will be in self-defense, and maybe in times past, Catholic faithful organized an active resistance, or they went into hiding, into catacombs, as it is, which is the solution that is, at least at this time, the one that is feasible, because there's no possibility that we can resist, because there are very few of us, and no means are not there. God will protect His church. The church will continue. If it will be our person as the rightful and true sovereign pontiff, or our successor, that is not known. That belongs to Christ our Lord to do and to decide, and we are content with what we have done, and we have not asked for this office, but it belongs to us by divine right and divine selection, and we know that it's the rightful decision of our Lord. And why is it so? Because of the circumstances that took place, which we will address one of these points in our future, God willing, publications. So this should suffice today. This dogma divinely revealed outside the true Catholic Church and without a practice of the Catholic faith, which is nothing else but Catholic tradition, is absolutely no salvation. All heretics, infidels, apostates, or communists, atheists, socialists, and so forth, if they die in such a state of their soul, they will burn in hell and do burn in hell. Do not be one of them, and certainly do not bear the yoke with infidels, with these heretics, apostates, these kind of fraudulent so-called orders, illegitimate orders, that only will lead you into these mires and connections with this non-Catholic apostate sect, and then the danger of perversion and perversion will be conclusive, obviously, and the devil will have the upper hand. And as it says in the Old Testament, with the holy thou shalt be holy, with the perverse thou shalt be perverted.